Let's consider the importance of trust by thinking about playing a type of game. So imagine you're in a room filled with other strangers for the most part. Say you're at an audience, maybe you've gone to the movies, something like that. And they stop everything and come in and they say, okay, we're going to play a little trust game here, right? Uh, get out your phone and unlock it, and then pass it to the person behind you. You may have a tiny little sense of panic if you're playing this game, and that seems quite reasonable. You want to think about that level of vulnerability here. In many of our interactions, we rely on overcoming this kind of situation in society. This cell phone example actually comes from Joe Gebbia's TED Talk on trust. He's a co-founder of Airbnb, and trust is a big issue for them. This trust issue takes place in their market operations between homeowners and vacation goers. Joe points out, how does it feel holding someone else's unlocked phone? Right? Now, you don't only pass a phone to somebody else, but somebody else is also going to pass a phone to you. When that phone is in your hand, how do you feel? Most people feel kind of responsible for it. That is how most guests with Airbnb feel when they are in someone else's home. Without this willingness to trust, without this willingness to feel responsibility, many transactions cannot exist. Joe Gebbia of Airbnb acknowledges as much. Right? Now, part of the trick is not just hoping that everyone in society always trusts everyone and thinking that everything will just work out perfectly. Like, hey, let's go give this lecture on trust for, a TED Talk and think about these concepts of holding somebody's phone and, just always trust people, no matter what. It always works out. It's great. Understanding trust's role in the economy is not thinking that trust is omnipresent. Don't be naive. Trust, cooperation, and fairness is context dependent. It's also path dependent. It depends on what's happened in the past, right? What kind of systems can emerge based on how we've trusted in the past? So I want you to think about the context of the situation and how important that is for establishing or being able to work through issues of trust. I hope that you wouldn't hold on to something from a stranger if you were walking along the streets of Detroit and someone looked like they were being chased and handed you something and said, please hold on to this for me. That's a different context than what we have at Airbnb. At Airbnb, they need that trust to exist though. But they also have design contexts in institutions to facilitate the transactions of trust. In his TED Talk, Gebbia wonders, how would you feel if you were handed a phone to a stranger and that stranger first introduced themselves with their first and last name? Hi, I'm Elliot G, right? And they showed you 150 positive ratings where others have said comments like, hey, he holds unlocked phones incredibly well, right? He has the gentle hands of an angel, right? How would you feel then? It's a much different context, a much different setting. The modern sharing economy relies heavily on this idea of growing exchanges via institutional design, such as these reputational mechanisms that Airbnb uses. This is helping encourage our trust, and it allows exchanges that formerly would not have taken place to now take place. The institutional design can promote efficiency, more exchanges, and prosperity. But so too does the non-sharing economy, as Aureli's pen example illuminates. Trust lowers all kinds of transaction costs that we take for granted, right? It allows for transactions to take place that otherwise would not have. Trust is incredibly important in a modern economy. All right, guys, so that was the coverage of trust. Up next is going to be cooperation. So click on the video here to move on within this lecture series, and we'll talk about how cooperation plays a role.